When relationships reach an extreme, we often ask, why can't they just leave? This question is especially sharp when a son lives with a daughter-in-law who has completely severed ties with his parents. On the surface, the solution seems obvious: divorce. But time and again, it doesn't happen. This lecture is not about blaming the choices people make. It is about exploring the structures that make certain choices feel impossible, dissecting the psychological mechanics behind them. Without this understanding, advice becomes pressure, love becomes control, and good intentions can drive relationships into deeper isolation. If what I am describing resonates with your family or someone you know, consider subscribing and sharing so we can open a doorway to understanding this complex structure together. Let's enter the psychological reality where divorce ceases to be a choice and becomes instead a seemingly inescapable structure. After marriage, a son living with a daughter-in-law in extreme estrangement experiences a repeated pattern. 1. When his wife becomes anxious, the situation feels uncontrollable. 2. Attempts to mediate only make it worse. If he leans toward his parents, his wife collapses emotionally. 4. If he stays silent, the situation barely holds together. Over time, these repeated experiences push the son toward one unspoken belief: if I leave, she will collapse. This is not a rational judgment. It is an experience-based conviction. The Tibetan Book of the Dead teaches that when consciousness cannot move forward, it lingers in a bardo of attachment. In this state, even when one sees the door to freedom stepping through, it feels like total annihilation. For the son, divorce is not a simple legal or relational act. It feels like entering a world of guilt where he imagines himself as the cause of another's collapse. And so no amount of reason can open that door. By now, the son has entered an invisible contract with his wife, not spoken, but psychologically binding. I will endure so that you do not fall. This is not love. It is the internalization of the rescuer role. The son no longer exists as a spouse. He exists as a safeguard. Parental advice to divorce backfires because, in his consciousness, 1. Parents do not understand the collapse he is preventing. 2. Parents do not recognize the responsibility he bears. 3. Parents underestimate him. 4. Parents appear intent on destroying the delicate balance. Advice is interpreted not as guidance, but as threat. Unconsciously, he distances himself from his parents. Why can't he choose for himself? The answer is that his own desires are paralyzed. Every thought of struggle, every wish to leave, every desire to live authentically is blocked as selfishness. He is already in his personal Bardo. As the Tibetan Book of the Dead explains, those who have forgotten themselves mistake illusions for reality. He lives in the hallucination that his wife's emotional collapse is his responsibility. It is crucial to understand in this structure his choice. Not to divorce is not irrational. He is making the best survival choice within the limits of his perception. The problem is that over time, this choice exhausts him. This lecture is not to defend his choices. It is to explain the structure that makes such choices inevitable. Without understanding it, love becomes pressure, and advice becomes alienation. If this resonates, subscribing and sharing can let others know. Families trapped in this structure are not alone. And here lies a critical question parents often ask: how long will it take for him to break free? But this is not a question of time, it is a question of awareness. The son must escape not merely a relationship, but a state of consciousness. The Tibetan Book of the Dead teaches that liberation from the Bardo depends not on time, but on the emergence of awareness. Some may awaken in a year, others may remain for decades. For sons living with daughters-in-law who have severed ties, 3 bardos converge. 1. The bardo of fear. If I leave, catastrophe will follow. The bardo of attachment. I have become accustomed to this pain, the Bardo of guilt. It is my responsibility to carry this burden. When these three intersect, external advice cannot penetrate. Parents' words are heard, but have no meaning. Recovery from this state occurs in stages. Stage 1, emotional numbing. 1. 3 years. He does not voice struggle, downplays the situation to parents, repeats, "I'm fine," and disconnects from feelings. Outwardly normal, inwardly paralyzed. Parental intervention is almost always counterproductive. Stage 2, fracture emergence. 3. 6 years. He begins experiencing inexplicable fatigue, helplessness, anger outbursts, physical symptoms, and depressive lethargy. He senses, for the first time, this is not normal. Yet he still cannot leave. The alternative reality is not yet visible. Understanding these stages allows us to see the invisible forces shaping decisions that seem impossible. The son is not weak. He is not selfish. He is navigating a psychological labyrinth created by attachment, fear, and guilt. As we saw, sons living with daughters-in-law who have severed ties with their parents often linger in a psychological limbo, a bardo of fear, attachment, and guilt. Divorce is not simply a matter of decision-making. It is an entanglement in consciousness itself. Advice, no matter how well-intentioned, often bounces off this invisible structure. The journey out of this bardo unfolds in stages. After years of emotional numbing and incremental fractures, a pivotal moment arises, the shift in perception. For many sons, this occurs somewhere between 6 and 10 years into the ordeal, though in rare cases it may take even longer. For the first time, they begin to realize, physically, not just intellectually, this is not a problem I can solve. This bodily understanding is the key. It opens the doorway of the bardo. Only when the son truly embodies this recognition does the world of realistic options therapy, boundary setting, temporary separation become visible. From here, the path diverges. One possibility is reconstruction with strong external intervention, guided counseling, and deliberate emotional and physical boundaries. The relationship is reshaped. The other possibility is termination, when self-preservation outweighs guilt. The relationship ends. It is critical to note that before this stage, parents can do almost nothing. Intervening too early often backfires. True transformation cannot be forced. It occurs only after the son has directly confronted the limits of his endurance. As the Tibetan Book of the Dead teaches, light appears, but if you fear, you will not see it. Only after experiencing the full terror of potential collapse can new light be recognized. So what can parents do? The answer is surprisingly simple. Do not advise, do not judge, do not take sides, and above all, do not close the door. Their role is to preserve the psychological, exit the possibility of return even when they cannot dictate its timing. Statistically, the reality is stark. Among 100 sons trapped in this structure, only about roughly 20% meaningfully emerge within 7 to 10 years. Another 25-30 remain aware of the pattern, but are immobilized by guilt and fear, maintaining the relationship outwardly while internally exhausted. The remaining 45-55 remain in long-term entrenchment, their desires paralyzed, suffering normalized, and almost entirely resistant to external interventions. Time alone does not heal this structure. It can even solidify it. Those who do escape do so because they crossed their own limits, not because of luck or persuasion. This brings us to an essential lesson for parents. Preparing their children for marriage, superficial criteria, appearance, education, occupation, family background cannot protect a child from the hidden dynamics that will most shape their lifelong trajectory. The true determinants of enduring relational health Are the consciousness structures inherited or encountered in the marriage unresolved parental divorces, internalized guilt, and the Bardo of attachment? The Tibetan Book of the Dead calls this liminal state a Bardo, a space where consciousness cannot return to the normal flow of life. In this state, relationships are not perceived as opportunities for love, but as potential traps, and the natural instinct is severance. Extreme estrangement by the daughter-in-law and the son's compliance with it emerge precisely from this dynamic. Marriage is not merely a union of qualifications. It is the intersection of consciousness structures, survival strategies, and psychological readiness. As the old saying warns, if you misprepare your soy paste, you regret a year. If you mischoose a marriage, you regret a lifetime. A failed marriage reshapes an entire life trajectory in ways a failed dish never could. This lecture is not a call to give up or to passively wait. Waiting is not inaction, nor is it avoidance. Waiting means keeping the door open while fully understanding the structure, preserving the possibility of return until the moment awareness arises. If this lecture has broadened your perspective, even slightly, share it and subscribe. Let those facing the same questions know they are not alone, and that understanding the structure rather than forcing change is the path that leaves hope alive. To summarize, sons do not stay because of weak will or poor judgment. They remain because they are navigating a consciousness state layered with fear, guilt, and attachment, a Bardo, where survival choices are constrained. Love alone cannot guide them back. Understanding the structure is what preserves the possibility of return. And the next natural question arises, what happens if the couple has no children? Children act as the final tether in a relationship. When that tether disappears, divorce may become the fastest perceived path to resolution. In the next lecture, we will explore childless marriages, analyzing how parental estrangement accelerates spousal hostility and divorce, viewed through the inner logic of extreme estrangement and the spouse's psychology. If this lecture has given you new insight into relational dynamics, subscribe and share. This is not merely academic. It is a guide for parents and children alike, a warning and a lesson for the choices that will shape entire lives.